Hey, welcome back, Northbound. On the last episode, we talked about valuing your support staff, about valuing your assistants, how to give them authority, how to recognize them, how to show them that you value them. And then when you give them authority, that you rely on that you let them run with it, and that you communicate to them properly. Sometimes it's the individual who's working in that back room, and you maybe never see them, you don't hear from them much, and yet they're running your organization or your company. Without them, it all falls apart. Sometimes that's things like that's paperwork and programs and stuff like that. And then other times it's culture. Sometimes there's a quiet person in your organization running your culture, and you may or may not even know it. I want to tell you a story. When I was a new lieutenant in the Air Force, and I had just gotten to my first operational squadron. I hadn't been there very long, and I was in the hallway, and I was watching these other guys in the hallway, and they were looking at a picture framed that showed our squadron patch, and it gave the history of the patch. And I want to tell you about these guys because they were all flyers in the Air Force, pilots, navigators, and so they wore flight suits. And on that flight suit was the patch that was represented on that picture in the hallway. And also coming down the hallway was a younger enlisted member, and she did not wear the patch because in those days, the flight suit wearers wore patches and everyone else did not. And that has changed, but back then they did not wear a squadron patch, only those with flight suits. To say that there was a hierarchy is an understatement. And in some cases, that can be unhealthy. In other cases, it's, a little bit of hierarchy in an organization is okay, but it can also be unhealthy. But in this case, the flight suit wearers with the patch are looking at that picture and they're commenting about their patch and the history of it. This squadron's mascot is a raven, and this raven is flying and looks tired. It has droopy eyes, and it just looks tired. But these flyers who were higher rank than me and much higher rank than the enlisted walking down the hall began to complain about the patch. They didn't like their squadron patch, and they were commenting about how the raven looked drunk, and it was a stupid patch that should be changed. And I will never forget what I witnessed because this young enlisted woman walking down the hall, I had never heard her speak. In fact, I didn't know where she worked. I was new and I was just observing here, but I had not met her before. I didn't know where she was in that building. And she was pretty quiet from what I could see. And she laid into those guys. And so she was also pretty short. And so I was like really surprised by this. I'm like, wow. She's talking, looking up to these tall flyer guys, and she's just laying into them. And she says, he is not drunk. He is weary from the days and days of ferreting, of flying long sorties off the coast. And she just begins to lay into him about our squadron culture, about where we came from, about the history of our patch. And she's telling them that they have no clue, even as leaders in this organization, they have no clue where we came from. And if you don't know where we came from, you most likely don't know where we're going. When she was done, she walked off, and they looked at her in surprise, shrugged, and walked off. And I went up to that picture and I read the history. And as I read it, I realized that she knew it by heart. She had laid into them and she had lectured them straight from our squadron history, word for word. This is a young, humble enlisted member of our Air Force who doesn't even wear that patch. And she knew her unit's history. I was impressed. I had just put the patch on, and I realized I should probably know what I'm wearing and why. That was the first patch that I gave away in that squadron. I walked down the hall. I found where she works, which was a back office, out of view of pretty much everyone else. And I went in and I said, I'm impressed. You know our squadron history, and you have taught me something today. And so I'm going to give you a patch. I know you don't wear it, but this one's from me. So it's yours. Now, those leaders were higher rank. They didn't necessarily lead the squadron from the very top. But what I witnessed that day was culture happening when leaders aren't in the room. And that culture was both good. There was positive aspects and negative aspects. The positive aspect is that your young enlisted know your squadron culture, but your higher level, you could call them executives or your higher level managers, they don't. And that information, that feedback was happening when the leadership, squadron leadership, was not in the room. And so as a leader, you need to talk about your history, your values to your entire organization. Remember that culture isn't just written, it's repeated. And so if you can't learn from what you have done and what you have learned, then you will repeat the bad and you might forget the good. You need to remember the things that your successes and continue those, and then remember your failures and don't repeat them. And sometimes the youngest or lowest level or the employee in the very, very back room knows your culture, maybe even better than you do. Don't ever ignore those voices. Go find them, get feedback from them. Your assistants might know your culture better than you do. And you're not going to figure this stuff out through surveys. You're going to figure it out through getting feedback and trusting your people. At Northbound Solutions, we want to help elevate your team through Christ-centered leadership. And God often reveals truth to the overlooked before the powerful. Remember that. The question isn't whether someone knows real culture. It's really about whether you and the leaders are humble enough to listen. Okay, thanks everybody for tuning in to Northbound. You know where to go, www.go-northbound.com, or you can email me, Chris, directly at chris@go-northbound.com. Thanks, everybody. See ya. You just listened to another episode from the Northbound podcast. Thank you for tuning in today. I hope you were encouraged and empowered in leadership. Go lead boldly and humbly. And remember our vision, elevate your team through Christ-centered leadership. If you want to be a part of our community, just go to go-northbound.com and follow the link and come join us. Follow along with courses and live streams and chats, and maybe even join us for an adventure. We'd love to have you. All of those links are in the description below. Thank you again for tuning in. It's been a pleasure. See ya.